from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. BR on the World, our international affairs program. The title of our episode today is President Mugabe, an African hero for all times. As most people are aware now that there is a coup in process, or perhaps they would say a generic brand, or actually using the term instead of saying coup, they would term it a non-coup, or a not sure of the term to apply to that, but anyway, we'll think perhaps of one before we are done here, as they say. We have been chronicling this from a number of different situations. Now, this is kind of interesting here. We'll start here. The coup process has started to unfold there on Wednesday, Thursday, and now we're into Saturday day here. There is later today in Harare, that is the capital of Zimbabwe, a demonstration that is supported by the military. Now, how this all started was the leader of the Youth League denounced the military leader. And the military leader, of course, is a sponsor or whatever you want to call it of a fella named Emerson. I don't have his last name. I'm sorry about that. But in our can, you will hear him. Oh, okay. He was the vice president in Gower. Anyway, this was the vice president, and he was sacked by President Mugabe. And his opponents saw that it would be clearing a way for his wife, Grace Mugabe, to be appointed a vice president there. And this is where the party, the ruling zanu-pf party, and now who is saying should quit, at least 8 out of 10 regional party branches voted on a Friday evening for Mr. Mugabe. See, they're not even calling him president here, and this is from the BBC. And you can understand there are a lot of sinister forces at work here, and from the Reuters agency, some documents came up that this Emerson Mnangagwa was planning this for over 1 year. Now, if things that happen in places like Zimbabwe, you can bet the British intelligence is up to their knickerbockers in it, period. And they call upon his wife, Grace Mugabe, to resign from the party, and for Mr. Mnangagwa to be reinstated to the party's central committee. Now, many people from throughout the world have stated that this should be negotiated. President Mugabe was at a annual inaugural ceremony for the university. He was there. He spoke at it, and you can hear it. You'll hear it in a minute here. And we'll also have a statement from the Zimbabwe Defence Forces, as it has been approached by the organizers. They say they're no doubt probably behind it. And the War Veterans League, and you hear that in our can part, is now supporting the coup, basically speaking, is what is being called for a huge turnout for the rally. Now, this rally will not only have the zanu-pf people there, but some of the opposition people will also get into the act, as they say. The three parties to keep up their pretense that the military has not staged a coup. This is a so this whole idea of having this aberration as a coup is honestly not fooling anyone. This is a ceremony at the Zimbabwe Open University where he is the chancellor. That is President Mugabe. One of the people that confirmed there was Mary Chimunga. She's the wife of the general that is detaining President Mugabe, and one has to understand that he is being detained from the Foreign Ministry of China. It said Beijing was hoping for a stable and a peaceful, appropriate solution. One of the people there from Botswana said the regional leaders did not support. Said the regional leaders not support President Mugabe being in power, but again, that is from Botswana. Dubious operation to begin with. From Alpha Kandi, he is chair of the African Union. Said the takeover seems like a coup and demanded a return to a constitutional order. And they should, in fact, return to a constitutional order. That is the day, no doubt about that, and it should happen. And that would be a prerequisite for anything that would happen. We'll try to get some words from President Mugabe. He spoke briefly at the inaugural ceremony. There's a picture of him there. And it's not in our can, so we wanted to get it here. Let me see if we can get it here, so you could hear actually his words. Big headline here from the BBC, but again, this is very suspect. Under the president makes his first public appearance since this coup operation here, and I think we'll be able to get it here in just a second, so you can hear the words of President Mugabe. He's actually walking in now.
By virtue of the authority vested in me, I declare this congregation of the Zimbabwe Open University duly constituted as a graduation ceremony.
And it's important to remember that
science and technology development, Dr. Mugabe, and honorable ministers and deputy ministers here present, the honorable minister of state, the provincial.
Okay, that was it. Sorry about the audio there was not the greatest, but this is from the Zambian Defence Force, has issued a statement informing the nation of new developments taking place regarding its operations and environmental issues. In the latest statement, saying resonating with one of its operations, thrusts relations to freedom of expression and movement. They have been approved by several private volunteer organizations, seeking to freely move and express their desires, and one such being a solidarity march planned in Harare grounds in Highfield tomorrow. Evidently, the statement was issued on the 17th, and to be on the 18th, the Zambian Defence Force thereby advising the nation that as long as the planned march remains orderly, peaceful, and in tandem with the fundamental Bill of Rights within the confines of the country's constitution, without hate speech and incitement to cause violence, it fully supports it. It also encourages march participants to be disciplined and to return to their respective provinces with dignity after the march procession. And I'll finish this up. Contrary to certain media reports, the Zimbabwe Defence Force believes are being generated by some of the corporates who have been apprehended. The nation is being advised that the operation remains solid, and at the same time Zambians are being requested to be patient. Meanwhile, the ZDF has commended the business community, who have responded overwhelmingly to the call to normalize socioeconomic effects to the population of Zambia by adjusting realistic prices. The ZDF has therefore expressed solidarity and drive towards a peaceful and united, investor-friendly, and prosperous Zambia. Now, this is very interesting, investor-friendly there. So, in other words, this smells and it looks like a counter-revolution. This is Zambia Online here, and we just read the press release of the Defense Forces. And let's see here. This is actually from Zambia, and this is President Mugabe at the graduation ceremony. He's, of course, Chancellor of the Open University, as we said before. And a little extra, the total of 3,339 students were conferred with first degrees, masters and doctorates from the Faculty of Arts, Education, Science and Technology, Applied Science, Agriculture, Communications, Law, and Information Technology. A number of the graduates, 203, received master's degrees, 17 received doctorates, while 1,900 were conferred with first degrees, they call it there. The graduates add to the 30, I think this is 190, the had released into the world, since inception. So this is 30,195 prominent personalities and dignitaries at this year's graduation. Were sports and recreations, arts, cultural minister there, Mr. Hawadneri, who attained a master's degree in communications there, retired Brigadier General Walter Kanhanger, who got a master's degree in peacemaking. And we already named Mrs. Chawanga. What did she get? Let's see. An MBA. So, there's various people here, a little bit more details. Speaking at the graduation ceremony, the acting chancellor, Professor Alfred Champion in Cuba, outlined some of the projects that the university is working on to comply with the modernization thrust and to expand its infrastructure. Visibly absent was higher education, science, technology, development Minister Professor Jonathan Moya, who was represented by his deputy. The graduation ceremony was held under the theme Transforming Higher Education for Industrialization and Modernization in line with the country's regional thrust. So we hear about that, and the caps and gowns here. This is the Zimbabwe's broadcasting company here is what we are coming from here in some of the news from Zimbabwe. Now, there are more things going on there than not, period. Let me just get this news, breaking news from the Zambian Defence Forces, Zimbabwe Defence Forces, sorry about that. Zimbabwe Defence Forces has said significant progress has been made in their operation, adding that they have accounted for some of the criminals around President Robert Mugabe in order to bring them to justice, since they were committing crimes that were causing social and economic suffering in the nation, while others are still at large. In the statement, they said they are currently engaging with the Commander-in-Chief, President Mugabe, on the way forward, and will advise the nation of the outcome as soon as possible. The Defense Force imported other security services to continue operation and carry out the duties without any form of impediment to their operation. So in other words, local police types are not there. On our Facebook page, the Boston Red Facebook page, we'll put some of this up. You can go to it and find some of the information, and we'll leave put a link to the Zimbabwe Broadcasting Corporation, and get some of it in there and see what is going on. And get back here, some of the local stories here on the tobacco receipts exceed 1 billion marks. So evidently tobacco is growing in Zimbabwe. All roads lead to Mendova. That is football. Football very important in Zimbabwe. Zanu-pf, but that is the party of President Mugabe, called for resignations here. The provinces say President Mugabe has allowed the formation of cabals. Now, they had mentioned that term there, these cabals, as they call them, that have been formed there. So, in other words, this is part of what is going on there. Former Women's League national political commissar, Mabel Chinamona, and the former chair there, let's see, maybe Mutaza, and so forth and so on. The party has called on members from all districts to come to their thousands for a solidarity march. We'll cover that solidarity march when it does, in fact, come up. And let's see if we can go to Zimbabwe television. And we've I'm not sure if we can get there. Different report. This is kind of interesting there. Let's just get this in here because we don't have the opportunity to cover them as much. Zimbabwe's rate of inflation for October rose to 2.24%, reflecting the impact of unadjusted price increments for basic commodities. Data obtained from the Zimbabwe National Statistics Agency today indicated that prices increased to 2.4% between October last year and October this year. The information also showed that the spike of prices during the month under review and has created inflationary pressure. The rise of inflation is also a wake-up call to fiscal and monetary authorities, according to Linton Zemba. So, Very interesting situation here. We'll put this up on our Numbers Man, which is also part of WBRN Radio, and our macro program, and we'll get this in due time here. Nonetheless, this is a recap of what has gone on. The Solidarity March will be tomorrow on Saturday, and we'll cover it also here at BR on the World. Thus, we will say goodbye, and you will go on to some of the speeches and some of the happenings from this week in the nation Zimbabwe under the African hero, President Robert Mugabe. And if most people remember him, he was the head of the liberation struggle there when they were removing the races and changing the name from Rhodesia to Zimbabwe, and he has been there with 30 years. He's 93 years old, the grand old man. In another sad piece of news here in the United States, received word today that the civil rights, human rights campaigner from Chicago, the Reverend Jesse Lewis Jackson, is now suffering from Parkinson's disease. We'll have more of that on Boston Red, the political program, and we invite you to listen to it. This weekend we have the week that was, and also our macroeconomics program. We cover a lot of different things, and we will look at Zimbabwe and the inflation rate there. We promise to put it in and see where it is. And we also have a technical program. We are interested in what is happening in various countries on the continent, not a generic Africa, but in Kenya, etc., and of course in Harare. In terms of infrastructure, where the infrastructure is going, because this is a global struggle for infrastructure as far as what is now called the Internet, and countries like Zimbabwe communicating with the world through their broadcast company, and we want to be a part of this. Good day.
Zimbabwe Corporation and the Herald were directed not to publicize the situation in our country has moved to another level. Firstly, we wish to assure the nation that His Excellency the President of the Republic of Zimbabwe and Commander-in-Chief of the Zimbabwe Defence Forces, Comrade R.G. Mugabe, and his family are safe and sound, and their security is guaranteed. We are only targeting criminals around him who are committing crimes that are causing social and economic suffering in the country in order to bring them to justice. As soon as we have accomplished our mission, we expect that the situation will return to normalcy. To the civil servants, as you are aware, there is a plan by the same individuals to influence the current purging which is taking place in the political sphere to the civil service. We are against that act of injustice, and we intend to protect everyone of you against that. To the judiciary, the measures underway are intended to ensure that, as an independent arm of the state, you are able to exercise your independent authority without fear of being obstructed, as has been the case with this group of individuals. To our members of Parliament, your legislative role is of paramount importance for peace and stability in this country. And it is our desire that a dispensation is created that allows you to serve your respective political constituencies according to democratic tenets. to the generality of the people of Zimbabwe, we urge you to remain calm and limit unnecessary movement. However, we encourage those who are employed and those with essential business in the city to continue their normal activities as usual. Our wish is that you enjoy your rights and freedoms, and that we return our country to a dispensation that allows for investment, development, and prosperity that we all fought for and for which many of our citizens paid the supreme sacrifice. To political parties, we urge you to discourage your members from engaging in violent behavior. To the youth, we call upon you to realize that the future of this country is yours. Do not be enticed with the dirty coins of silver. Be disciplined and remain committed to the ethos and values of this great nation. To all churches and religious organizations in Zimbabwe, we call upon you and your congregations to pray for our country and to preach the gospel of love, peace, unity, and development. To both our people and the world beyond our borders, we wish to make it abundantly clear that this is not a military takeover of government. What the Zimbabwe Defence Forces is doing is to pacify a degenerating political, social, and economic situation in our country, which, if not addressed, may result in a violent conflict. We call upon all the war veterans to play a positive role in ensuring peace, stability, and unity in the country. To members of the Zimbabwe Defence Forces, all leave is cancelled, and you are all to return to your barracks with immediate effect. To our respected traditional leaders, you are the custodians of our culture, customs, traditions, and heritage, and we request you to provide leadership and direction to your communities for the sake of unity and development in our country. To the other security services, we urge you to cooperate for the good of our country. Let it be clear that we intend to address the human security threats in our country. Therefore, any provocation will be met with an appropriate response. And to the media, we urge you to report fairly and responsibly. We thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen of the journalist fraternity, we would like to welcome you to this historic press conference by the war veterans. I think it is important that the world knows that the revolutionaries can only differ in stature, sometimes in the construction of the sentences, in interpreting the principles of the revolution, but their meaning will always be the same. So really today, we welcome you to this historic press conference. To us, it is a victory for the war veterans and the people of Zimbabwe, because the war veterans are the army of the people. The marriage between the war veterans and the masses dates back to when the people of Zimbabwe made a strategic retreat in 1896-93. And today, again, here we are. Allow me, therefore, to introduce to you Those in front here, probably it's not necessary to introduce them by name, but all of them are members of the national and the provincial executives of the war veterans across the country. They have come here to witness this moment, which is very important to us. And as I speak, allow me therefore again to introduce to you the National Secretary General of the Zimbabwe National Liberation War Veterans Association, who will address the press conference today. Comrade Matema Dana.
Amandla. The Constitution of Zimbabwe, unlike the Lancaster House Constitution, this constitution was written by all the political parties of Zimbabwe and all the people, including churches and many all organizations. So it is a constitution that represents the will of the people of Zimbabwe. And it is in this constitution that we have a section that empowers the defense forces to take appropriate action to defend national security, sovereignty, and human life. What Zimbabwe has been sliding into was a state of chaos. And for that reason, war veterans here do stand with the Zimbabwe Defence Forces, save for those that have been used by the G40 cabal. They are known. The police has been harassing people willy-nilly because they've been agreeing to be abused by the G40 cabal, and it is time for them to reform. I now read the statement. This statement's theme is bringing ZANU-PF and Zimbabwe back to constitutionalism. We, the veterans of National Liberation War, would like to state as follows. We applaud the gallant role taken by the Zimbabwe Defence Forces in defense of Zimbabwe's constitution to normalize the situation within the ruling ZANU-PF. We urge that ZANU-PF returns quickly to constitutionalism and sets aside all the dismissals that were instigated by Kasukuwere on all progressive people, especially this paging was focusing mostly on people with a liberation history. Therefore, we are saying that all people that were expelled or suspended because of the G40 cabal from the Central Committee, provinces, districts, and some ordinary members, which were dealt with unprocedurally by the so-called National Disciplinary Committee. This should be reversed by the Central Committee of ZANU-PF as it stood a day after the December 2014 Congress. We urge that as the Central Committee reconvenes, it should quickly embrace and institutionalize the idea of the War Veterans League as a fourth wing of the Revolutionary Party. The vanguard role of the war veterans, war collaborators, detainees should be reinstated and upheld. But it is fundamental for you for me to tell you that even before that is done, we sit here as the Darere Chumurenga. We urge all people within the party, especially the youths and women, Women's League, to support this great initiative to return the party to constitutionalism. Yes. How do you have a political party that is fronted by wings instead of the main wing? The Women's League becomes bigger than the main wing. The Youth League becomes both the leading arm and also the army. Because if Kutsichipanga can threaten the Zimbabwe Defence Forces with the war, then he is not a leader of the youths, he is a commander of an army that we do not know. And for that, he must be brought to book. But what worries us is why the president allowed a person to have a quasi-military in a state that has got an army. Because by not reprimanding Kudzi, he agreed that Kudzi, in fact, leads an army. We urge all political parties in Zimbabwe to support a return to normalcy in the country to avoid any violent inclinations. The Zimbabwe National Liberation War Veterans Association recognizes that all the political parties in Zimbabwe recognize and respect, uphold the role that was played by war veterans, war collaborators, and war detainees. And therefore, we do not have a reason to have them as enemies. So when we say we want to have normalcy in the running of this country, we also want to facilitate good and proper running of political parties in the forthcoming elections. So the army is there to restore order and sanity. And like I've said, this has been long overdue. And we support that from the bottom of our hearts. The youths are encouraged to respect state institutions that are mandated to do particular duties in accordance with the law of the land. This country is not run by the zanu-pf Youth League. It must be clear. ZANU-PF Youth League is not an arm of government, and therefore they should respect the institutions that are mandated to do whatever duty, responsibility they are tasked to do. And for a mayor youth who has got a history of changing goals, one day is Gamma Talks, the other day is the firstborn of Grace Mugabe, when Chatunga is there. We think he did this because of the normal bootlicking that had become the order of politics in ZANU-PF, which should come to an end forthwith. We cannot end without mention of a job well done by the Commander Defence Forces and the commander of the Army and the Air Force, officers and men, women, and all those that have to do with the Defense Forces for a job well done. Zimbabwe belongs to us, and what has been done is for Zimbabwe. We call upon all sections of our security forces to emulate the example of the ZDF. They should shun the practices of yesterday, where some were used by Kasukwere Kabao to arrest and prosecute innocent revolutionaries whose only crime was to oppose the state capture. As I speak, the police has not cleared our 18th November Indawa for fictitious reasons, and let it be known to them that the meeting is going on. If people in the ZRP have got the Rhodesian mentality, we have crossed over to Zimbabwe. They should come and provide security if they want, but they cannot stop us.
Our senior members of the Rainbow Coalition, members of the press, ladies and gentlemen, fellow Zimbabweans, I stand before you as the nominated presidential candidate for the People's Rainbow Coalition, PRC. PRC, amongst its core values, has the liberation struggle, selfless sacrifices and courage of our forebearers and compatriots who contributed in different ways for the attainment of our national independence. Our story of the liberation struggle cannot be complete without paying great respect to the collective will and determination of revolutionary cadres, detainees, restrictees, and other freedom fighters. In our collective way, we fought for one man, one vote. We fought for land, racial discrimination, suppression of women, children, people living with disabilities, to name but just a few. We fought to build a democratic and legitimate government that is based on popular support, founded on the basis of participatory democracy, which can only be achieved through free, fair, and credible elections. As PRC, we stand on the firm foundation that Zimbabwe should be a land of equal opportunities for all who call it home, not for few selected individuals or a group. That's the essence of democracy, and that's why Zimbabwe paid the ultimate price for the attainment of our national independence. As PRC, we note the current political developments in our country. We are, however, heartened by the assurances given during these present political developments that condemns violence and encourages peace. We therefore urge Zimbabweans that the observation of the rule of law be the cornerstone of our conduct as we seek to revive our constitutional democracy. We are at a time that peace is the only realized, or can only be realized through maximum restraint and constructive exchange of ideas as Zimbabweans. Going forward, as PRC believes that present political developments require collective engagement and national dialogue of all critical stakeholders in our country. Beyond political actors, it should also include faith-based organizations, workers' movements, civil society, and students' movements. For the success of such collective engagement and dialogue, there is no doubt that we are in need of transitional arrangement that should attend to key issues of economic recovery and electoral reform processes. Our country's reconstruction and national healing process can only be a product of free, fair and credible elections which are to be held within a reasonable time post an agreed transitional agreement period. PRC believes that free, fair and credible elections can only be achieved through an enabling environment both during the current and registration exercise for one to register to vote and to actually voting process itself. National elections are the backdrop of every celebrated constitutional democracy. It therefore follows that such elections should be observed and supervised by the African Union, SADC, electoral pan-African institutions, civil society, local electoral agencies, and the international community under the auspices of the United Nations. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen and members of the press, what divides us as a nation is smaller than what binds us. We ought to be bound by ideological underpinnings of social democracy, Pan-Africanism, decolonial thought and principles of a modern democratic developmental state. It's time to reflect as we seek to rebuild and reconstruct our beautiful country, our great Zimbabwe. Together we can make our country great. May God bless Zimbabwe.
About the ZDF commander and the army yesterday. Let's hear him speak.
Public apology to the Commander, Defence Forces, General Constant Gobert Chiwenga, Commander, Zimbabwe National Army, General Philip Valeros Banda, Commander, Air Force of Zimbabwe, Air Marshal Clarence Shiri, the Generality of Zimbabwe Defence Forces, and the entire nation of Zimbabwe. I would like to apologize for the statement I have made yesterday at zanu-pf headquarters together with my executive. I, as the leader of the Revolutionary Party's Youth League, I have reflected and personally admitted that I was ill-advised to read a statement which I and the Youth League had not originated, neither authored. The document which I read, I was handed it over by one Rodney Dangarimbisi in the morning at around 8:30 a.m., which was denigrating your high office and your person. Therefore, I kindly request General Chiwenga to please accept my apologies on behalf of the Youth League and myself. We are still young people, we are still growing up, We learn from our mistakes, and from this big mistake, we have learned a lot. I also like to emphasize that this statement which I have given, I have not been persuaded, neither coerced or forced to do as such. I'm emphasizing that I have reflected on my own as a young person, as a leader of the Youth League. Hence, I have come to this juncture of offering myself to the state media to give this public apology. We shall also make frantic efforts to approach the commanders of our defense forces in person so that we convey this